It started with a flat tire, a grease-stained jacket, and a stranger on the side of the road. Single dad Mark Rollins thought he was just lending a hand to a stranded biker. He didn't expect to lose his job for it, and he certainly didn't expect the roar of 40 Harleys rumbling down his quiet suburban street 3 days later. What began as a simple act of kindness would tear open a world Mark never knew existed, one that doesn't forget loyalty and never forgives betrayal. The rain came down in sheets, smearing the world into a watery blur as the wipers struggled against the rhythm of the storm. Mark Rollins squinted through the windshield, both hands gripping the wheel of his rusting 2009 Ford Focus. The heater barely worked, and the defroster coughed lukewarm air that did nothing to ease the mist gathering on the inside of the glass dot. It was past midnight. The road was empty, and the silence was a rare relief. He'd just gotten off another 12-hour shift at the Millstone packing plant, reeking of cold grease and old sweat. His shoulders ached, his knees were shot, and the only thing he wanted in that moment was to collapse onto the couch back at the duplex, maybe heat up a microwave burrito before falling asleep in front of reruns. His 10-year-old son, Eli, would already be fast asleep, hopefully, lately. The kid had been asking questions Mark didn't know how to answer questions about. Why they didn't have cable anymore, or why mom never called anymore. At worst, if he was going to have to move schools again, Mark didn't have answers for any of them. Only a tired smile and the promise that everything would be okay. He was about to pass the last stretch of highway before their neighborhood, when something caught his eye through the slashing rain. A motorcycle, parked sideways off the shoulder, partly in the ditch, its hazard lights blinking. A man stood beside it, hunched under a soaked denim vest. He waved once briefly, low, but didn't move from the bike. No phone in sight. Mark's first instinct was to drive past. He was tired, worn thin, and the world taught him early on that you don't stop for anyone in the dark on a deserted road, especially not some hulking guy in the rain next to a bike with custom chrome. But then again, the man hadn't tried to flag him down. He just stood there, proud or stubborn or defeated. Mark could almost see himself in that soaked silhouette, someone just trying to get through the night. With a muttered curse, Mark pulled over. His tires crunched gravel as he rolled up behind the bike. He hit the hazards, cut the engine, and stepped out into the cold downpour. The biker turned slowly. He was taller than Mark by a head, with a grizzled beard and a patch-covered vest that clung to his broad frame like wet parchment. His left arm was inked from shoulder to wrist. A scar sliced through one brow, and his eyes were cold, unreadable. Didn't expect anyone to stop. The biker said, his voice rough like gravel and smoke, "Yeah, well." Mark shrugged. "I'm a sucker for lost cousins." The biker let out a low chuckle. Chain snapped. Back wheels locked. "I was about to start walking. You got tools?" Mark popped the trunk and rummaged through his emergency kit. "I've got some pliers, a basic wrench, and duct tape. It won't get you to Vegas, but it might get you off the side of the road." They worked in the rain for 20 minutes. Barely speaking, Mark knelt in the mud while the biker steadied the machine. His fingers were numb by the time he got the chain jury rigged enough to allow it to roll free. "Try that," Mark said, stepping back, drenched and shivering. The biker rolled the throttle once, and the engine coughed to life. The wheel turned. "You're good," Mark added, "at least for a few miles. Just go easy on the throttle." The man looked at him long and hard and then did something unexpected. He stuck out his hand. "Reaper," he said. "Yeah, that's the name I go by." Mark hesitated before shaking it. "Mark, I don't go by anything. Just Mark." Reaper's grip was solid. "You didn't have to stop." "Yeah," Mark said, wiping rain from his brow. "But I did." Without another word, Reaper mounted the bike, gunned the engine once, and vanished into the storm, leaving only the stench of fuel and the echo of roaring exhaust in his wake. Mark didn't think much about it afterward. He drove home, stripped out of his soaked clothes, and collapsed on the couch. Eli was asleep with his stuffed dinosaur tucked under one arm, the blanket kicked halfway off. Mark covered him, then microwaved half a burrito and passed out in front of the TV. By morning, the rain had passed, but something heavier lingered in the air. At the plant, he arrived 10 minutes late, soaked shoes squishing as he crossed the slick concrete floors. His supervisor, a rat-faced man named Gibbons, was waiting at the clocking station with a clipboard and a frown. "You were late." "Yeah, storm last night. Road was a mess." "That all?" Gibbons leaned forward, Smug. Mark didn't like the look in his eye. What's your point? Gibbons flipped a sheet on his clipboard and handed Mark a printed photo from the plant's security. Feed grainy black and white footage from the parking lot. It showed Mark talking to Reaper. His stomach dropped. You know who that is? Gibbons asked. Double quotes. No. I mean, he broke down on the side of the road. I helped him fix his bike. That's it. That biker is on a federal watch list. You've been talking to known affiliates. Mark blinked. You're kidding me. Company has a zero-tolerance policy for anything that might compromise workplace safety. Your proximity to gang activity is grounds for immediate dismissal. You're firing me for helping someone on the road. Gibbons didn't blink. You can argue with HR, but I suggest you clean out your locker. He left the plant an hour later, dazed, humiliated, and broke. In a single moment, everything he'd been struggling to hold together started to unravel. He sat in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, trying not to cry. How was he going to explain this to Eli? He picked him up from school like nothing had happened, drove home, made grilled cheese sandwiches, watched cartoons like it was just another Tuesday. But something shifted behind his son's eyes when Mark said, "Don't worry about dinner. Tomorrow, I'll be home early. You're not working late. Not this week." Eli looked at him, chewing slowly. Something in that silence told Mark the kid already knew. 2 days passed. Mark applied to everything: warehouse gigs, night shifts, delivery jobs, but none of them bit. Calls stopped coming after they followed up on his file. Something was poisoning his reputation, and he didn't need to guess what. Even the landlord called, asking when rent was coming. Mark lied and said, Friday. It was Thursday when he heard the rumble. At first, he thought it was thunder. Then it kept growing deeper, rhythmic, like the beat of war drums. Then came the roar of engines. 40 motorcycles, black and chrome, rolled into his sleepy suburban cul-de-sac. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Dogs barked. Kids ran inside. Mark stepped outside, barefoot, heart pounding. He counted the riders as they circled once, then cut their engines and stood in silence. From the lead bike stepped Reaper. His expression was unreadable. Mark didn't speak. Reaper handed him a sealed envelope. "What is this?" "Appreciation." "I didn't do anything. You stopped," Reaper said simply when nobody else would. Mark opened the envelope. "Cash. A thick wad of it. I can't take this." "You already did." Reaper turned. "We'll be watching, just in case." The bikes rumbled to life, and within seconds, they were gone, leaving tire marks, stunned neighbors, and a single father standing in the street with a fistful of money, and the uneasy feeling that a door had just been opened, one he couldn't close. Mark Rollins hadn't slept. It had been 3 days since 40 bikers thundered into his neighborhood and left him standing in the middle of the street, soaked in disbelief, clutching an envelope filled with more cash than he'd seen in a year. The memory was fresh to fresh. Their engine still echoed in his skull when he closed his eyes, and that name Reaper clung to his thoughts like oil to skin. He hadn't spent the money. It sat in a drawer beneath the sink, wrapped in a torn towel, hidden behind a stack of unpaid bills. Every time he opened the drawer, the weight of it called to him, but using it felt like stepping off a ledge. He wasn't ready to fall just yet. Eli noticed the tension. He hadn't said much, but kids know when something's wrong. Mark tried to smile more. He cooked pancakes for dinner. He promised they'd go fishing soon, even though the tackle box hadn't been touched in years. But behind the closed bathroom door each night, Mark stared into the mirror, the bags under his eyes deepening, the stubble on his jawline unshaven. He'd become something between a father and a ghost. On the 4th day, the envelope wasn't alone. Mark stepped out onto his porch and nearly tripped over another one, a manila envelope, slightly thicker, heavier, no note, no signature. Just there. He opened it inside, hands trembling, more cash, and this time a prepaid burner phone. He stared at it for a long time, and then he put it back in the drawer. The phone rang the next day. Not his cell, the burner. One shrill buzz, one message, garage, 3 p.m., no name, no voice. But he knew. He stared at the digits glowing on the cheap phone screen and thought about ignoring it. He didn't. The garage wasn't hard to find. It wasn't even hidden. Just an old auto shop on the east side of town that looked like it hadn't changed since 1982. Mark pulled up in the Ford, his fingers gripping the steering wheel like it was a lifeline. The sign above the garage door read Ridgewood Customs with one of the OS in the shape of a skull. A man stood outside, smoking, no colors, no jacket. But Mark recognized the tattoos that crawled up his neck like roots. "You Mark?" the man asked. "Yeah, go on in." The garage door groaned open as Mark stepped inside. Dye smelled like gasoline, rubber, and something older. The walls were lined with bike parts chrome handlebars. Tires stacked to the ceiling, license plates from every state. A jukebox in the corner played something slow and bluesy. Reaper stood beside a stripped-down Harley, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. "Glad you came," he said without looking up. "I didn't have much of a choice." "You always got a choice," Reaper said, tossing the rag aside. "But this one's easy. We owe you." "You're not forgotten." Mark crossed his arms. "You already dropped off money. Twice. I didn't ask for anything. That's why you're getting it," Reaper said, finally turning. "People don't do what you did. Not these days. Not for someone like me." Mark stared. "What did I do?" "You stopped," Reaper said simply. "That matters." "To us? To who exactly?" Mark asked, voice low. Reaper smirked, nodding. Toward a back wall, a faded patch hung there. Black, red, white. Hell's Angels. Mark swallowed. "I didn't sign up for this," he said. "No one said you did. You're not patched. You're not under the flag. But you're marked, now. That's how this works." "Marked?" Reaper stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Every man has moments that decide which way his life turns. Yours happened on that road. Now you've got a brotherhood behind you, and that makes you a target to some, an ally to others. Best to know which is which." Mark didn't answer. Reaper reached into a drawer and pulled out a small envelope. Another one, thinner. This time, it had a note inside. "Any job you want. We'll open the door." "Don't make me your charity case," Mark said. "This isn't charity," Reaper said. "It's balance. We settled debts. You saved me from a bad night. I don't forget that." He stepped past Mark and opened the garage door again. Sunlight poured through. "You're not one of us, Mark," Reaper added, "but you've been seen. That doesn't go away." Mark stood in silence as Reaper lit a cigarette and walked outside. That night, Mark opened the drawer again. 3 envelopes. Now Dot and a choice. The next few days blurred. Mark stayed home, unemployed, trying to shield Eli from the growing tension in the house. Groceries started appearing on the doorstep, bags full, with name-brand cereal, fresh produce, even Ellie's favorite chocolate milk. At first, Mark thought it was charity. Then he realized there were no labels, no store receipts. He didn't touch them, but they kept coming, and the neighborhood started to change. People noticed. His next-door neighbor, Mrs. Kent, stopped waving. A man across the street began parking his car in reverse, trunked toward the road. He'd glance up at Mark's house every time he left. A police cruiser began making slow, regular passes by his home, never stopping. "Just watching." Ellie's school called Dot. His teacher's voice was cautious. "There have been concerns. A few parents asked if your family's going through something." Mark bit down hard on his response. "We're fine." That night, Eli asked the question Mark had been dreading. "Why are there guys sitting on motorcycles down the street?" Mark looked out the window. To bikes. Same every night. Different riders, but the same presence. Silent. Vigilant. "They're just making sure we're okay," he said carefully. "Are they bad people?" Mark didn't answer at first. Then he knelt beside Ellie's bed. "They're people who take care of their own." "Are we?" "Their own." Mark hesitated again. "Right now, I think we are." The burner phone rang again. No message this time. Just a time. "Tomorrow, midnight." Mark answered, his voice low. "I'm not doing anything illegal." Reaper's voice on the other end was calm, almost amused. "No one said you were. We just want to talk." "Where?" "You'll know." The line went dead. Midnight came. Mark drove. Guided by instinct and tension, they met him at the edge of town, a half-abandoned gas station, long since gutted by time. Neon buzzed overhead, and the only light came from a ring of bikes forming a half-moon around the front entrance. Reaper waited, leaning against a black custom chopper, smoking a cigar. "We've been watching," he said. "Yeah, I noticed." Reaper nodded. "That wasn't protection. That was presence. There's a difference." Mark crossed his arms, and now he asked for something back. There it was. The shift, the test. Mark braced himself. Reaper tossed a folded paper. Onto the hood of Mark's car, a map, a route, back roads, far from traffic, just a one-night run. You drive, Reaper said. You don't ask. You don't open anything. You drop it off and walk away. We'll take care of the rest. And if I say no, then you say no, Reaper replied, but doors closed both ways. Mark looked down at the paper. No threats, no promises. Just direction. You got until tomorrow night. Reaper stepped back, fading into the darkness with the others. Mark was left alone in the blue glow of the station lights, the map burning in his hand. Back home, he sat at the kitchen table until dawn, the envelope open in front of him, the route drawn in red marker staring back like a wound. He thought about Eli, about groceries that appeared when he had nothing, about men who sat in silence, not asking anything. Until now, he thought about the moment he stopped on the road, and how that one choice had turned his whole life sideways. By morning, the decision was made. He folded the map. And prepared for the night drive that would change everything. The night was silent as Mark Rollins coasted through the dark, rural highway, headlights sweeping across a ribbon of cracked asphalt and scattered pine needles. The map Reaper had given him sat folded on the passenger seat, the route burned into his brain. No cities, no tolls, no stops, just winding back roads and empty fields under a sky so black it felt like falling into ink. He glanced at the duffel bag in the back seat, taped shut, heavy, ominous. He hadn't asked what was inside. He hadn't dared. Reaper's words echoed in his mind. Don't look. Don't ask. Drive slow. Drop it off. Then you're done. It didn't feel like he'd be done. Not really. Earlier that day, Mark stood in the kitchen, hands shaking as he poured cereal for Eli, his son, ever observant, tilted his head. You okay, Dad? Mark forced a smile. Just tired, bud. Didn't sleep much. Eli spooned cereal into his mouth and looked out the window. The bikes were gone that morning. No silent watchers on the curb. No chrome glinting in the sun. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Mark feel exposed, unprotected. He watched his son chew and wondered how much longer he could keep pretending this wasn't real. This strange half-life he was now living in. He still hadn't told Eli he'd lost his job. The groceries kept coming. The bills were somehow paid. But it wasn't his doing. That scared him more than anything else. The location was a rundown barn set deep in the woods past an abandoned cattle farm. No lights, no vehicles, just an oil lamp burning above the door and a man standing beside it. Mark pulled in slowly, tires crunching gravel. The man stepped forward, face shadowed under a hooded jacket. No words, no greetings. Mark got out, opened the back seat, and lifted the bag with both hands. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried something more than weight, a consequence waiting to happen. He handed it over. The man nodded once, then turned and walked into the barn, door creaking shut behind him. That was it. No one said thank you. No handshakes, no explanations. Mark stood in the silence of the woods, heart pounding, before getting back into the car and heading home. By the time Mark returned, the sun was peeking over the horizon, bleeding pale orange through the early mist. He stepped inside, shoes muddy, clothes damp with sweat. Eli was still asleep. The burner phone was waiting on the counter. A new message lit up the screen. Well done. That was all. Mark turned it off and threw it back in the drawer. The next few days passed like a dream or a warning. Time felt elastic, stretching and collapsing on itself. The bikers returned, but only at a distance. They never approached, never spoke, just watched. And then the envelope came. Not with cash this time. A note, typed, impersonal. We kept our word. You're under our wing, but wings aren't free. Stay available. Mark sat at the kitchen table staring at it for hours. He had been naive to think this world worked on favors alone. Nothing was ever free. Not for men who rode with names like Reaper. They had their own code, their own currency. Brotherhood wasn't kindness. It was obligation. And now, it was Mark's turn to pay it back. That week, a black sedan began showing up near the house. Unmarked, tinted windows. It parked across the street sometimes, engine running. The man inside wore sunglasses, even at dusk. He never approached. Mark knew what that meant. He was being watched, not by Reaper's crew this time, but by law enforcement, feds, maybe or worse. He didn't know if the drop he'd made had been bait or real contraband. But whatever, It was. Someone had noticed. Someone who didn't wear patches or ride motorcycles. Asterisk Reaper showed up in the garage again. This time unannounced. Eli was at school. The air was quiet. Mark heard the knock and opened the door to find him leaning against the wall, cigarette burning low between his fingers. "You did good," Reaper said without preamble. "Someone's watching me now. We know. You sent me out there knowing it was dirty." Reaper exhaled a stream of smoke and shrugged. "You want protection. That comes with weight. One favor. That's what we asked. I didn't sign up for this." Reaper's voice turned quiet, not angry, but final. "You did when you stopped. You stepped into a world most people cross the street to avoid, and we don't forget kindness, ever. But now you got eyes on you. That's not from us." Mark stepped back, voice low and trembling. "You used me." Reaper flicked ash too. "The floor. We gave you a hand when no one else would. You took it. And now the world sees you differently. That's not our doing. That's how the world works." Mark stared at him, feeling the walls of his small, broken life closing in. Reaper put the cigarette out on the doorframe and handed Mark a small black card. Embossed in silver ink was a phone number. No name, just numbers. "You want out?" Reaper said. "Call this. Burn the phone, we disappear. You'll never see us again." Mark took it. Reaper turned to go, but paused at the threshold. "Just remember, this world doesn't forget favors. Neither does the other one." Asterisk that night, Eli couldn't sleep. He stood in the doorway of Mark's room, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. "Dad?" "Yeah, buddy. Those guys with the bikes, are they gonna hurt you?" Mark's heart twisted. "No, they're not here to hurt us." "Then why do they keep watching?" Mark didn't answer at first. "Because they think I helped one of them, and in their world, that means something." Eli climbed into bed beside him and lay still. "I don't want them to come anymore." Mark stared at the ceiling. "Me neither." Asterisk the next day, the burner phone rang again. No message this time, just Reaper's voice. "You still got the card?" "Yeah. Don't use it yet." "Why?" "Because we've got a problem, and it's about to become your problem too." Mark sat up straight. "What are you talking about?" "Someone's been talking. Not from our side, from the outside. Someone who saw the drop, followed you, maybe took pictures. We think it's a cop." Mark's blood ran cold. "I didn't know anything. We know that. But they don't care. They'll press you, lean on your kid, show up at your house. You're not clean anymore, Mark, whether you like it or not." Mark stood, pacing the room. "What do you want from me?" Reaper's voice turned darker. "Help us find the rat. You're the only one he hasn't seen yet. He thinks you're just a mule. You get close, you confirm, then we clean it up. After that, you walk. And if I say no, then we let the wolves circle. You're free to choose, Mark. But don't pretend the world out there isn't worse than the one you're in." The line went dead. Asterisk Mark sat at the kitchen table again, card in one hand, burner phone in the other. Eli was outside playing, laughing as he rode his bike up and down the driveway. Mark watched him through the window, chest tight. He'd crossed a line of night. He stopped for Reaper, maybe not knowingly, maybe not willingly. But lines don't uncross. He could call the number, get out, lose the money, the support, the strange sense of safety he'd come to rely on. But then what? Police at his door, the feds pulling him into a cold room, Eli being taken from him. Or he could help them, do one more job, confirm the rat, stay on their good side, buy himself time. It wasn't a choice. It was a slow surrender. He reached for the phone. Asterisk Mark was no longer a bystander. He was a player in a game he barely understood, caught between law and lawlessness, between loyalty and fear. The protection they offered had become a leash. And now the price was being collected, one job at a time. Mark Rollins had always believed he was the kind of man who kept his head down, a worker, a father, the kind of guy who followed rules, stayed quiet, and never made enemies. But now, staring into the mirror of his dimly lit bathroom, sweat clinging to his forehead, he realized something. That man no longer existed. He'd been remade, not by choice, but by necessity. By brotherhood. By fear. By blood. Asterisk the job came fast. After the phone call with Reaper, Mark received a plain envelope slipped under his door at midnight. Inside was a name, a photo, and a short note. "He's the rat. Get him talking. Get it on tape. One conversation. That's all we need." The man in the photo looked like someone out of a city council meeting, middle-aged, khakis, polo shirt. According to Reaper's brief words, he was a consultant for a nearby trucking company, a front used by several of the club's members to move their shipments. Except this guy had been quietly passing information to law enforcement in exchange for immunity, and the feds wanted to flip Mark next, the man caught between worlds. The Angels wanted him to earn his stripes just once, not as a patch member, not as a criminal, but as someone they could trust. It wasn't about hurting the guy, just getting the truth, a single recorded conversation, and after that, Reaper promised, "You're out. We're even. No more jobs. You disappear." Mark wanted to believe that. He had to. They met at a local bar the town's over, the kind of place where no one asked questions, and the jukebox played nothing but classic rock and regret. Mark approached the man from the photo at the bar, posing as a disgruntled driver looking to make extra cash. The man, Rick, had the look of someone who was always half nervous, eyes darting like a cornered rabbit. They drank, talked. Mark pretended to be bitter about his arrest record, about losing his job, about how the club had used him and tossed him. He played the part to well. Rick leaned in close. "You didn't hear it from me," he said, voice hushed over the clink of glasses. "But you were never their guy. You were just bait. The feds have a file on the whole Ridgewood crew. I've been feeding them roots, drop times. I gave them your name, too. It was in the system days after you made the delivery." Mark's heart dropped. He felt the blood drain from his face, but he didn't react. He let the recorder run in his pocket. Every word was crystal clear. Asterisk. He didn't even need to return to Reaper. He just sent the file. No reply came. Not that night. Not the next day. Mark felt like a ghost in his own skin, drifting through the days, waiting for the sky to fall or the ground to open up. When the call finally came, it was Reaper again, calm, cold. "It's done," he said. Mark didn't ask for details. He didn't want them. Reaper continued, "You did good, Mark. You proved you can handle pressure. Think about what comes next." "I thought I was out," Mark said, voice low. "You are, if you want to be. But out there," Reaper said, "they don't forget. The law doesn't forgive. They'll still be watching, still waiting for you to mess up." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this patch," Reaper said, "isn't just a symbol. It's a shield. No one touches ours without bleeding." That night, Mark stayed up until dawn, staring at the burner phone and the final envelope Reaper had sent him. Inside was something he never expected, a patch cut, a leather vest with the Hells Angels insignia, and beneath it, a stitched tag reading, "Prospect Rollins." It wasn't a joke. It was a real offer, and an unspoken ultimatum. He could put it on and step fully into the world that had protected him, fed his son, and turned him from a victim into someone no one dared touch, or he could walk away, if walking away was even still possible. He made his decision the next day. Mark packed everything he could into a pair of duffel bags. Clothes, cash, IDs, birth certificates, the burner phone he smashed with a hammer, the cut he wrapped in a garbage bag and buried in the backyard. He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye. 4 a.m. He carried Eli, still asleep, into the car and drove. No destination, just away from the cul-de-sac, away from Ridgewood, away from the roar of engines and eyes watching him through tinted glass. He drove until the gas gauge blinked red, then he drove a little farther. 3 weeks later, Mark and Eli were living in a small trailer on the edge of a fishing town, along the Oregon coast, a place where no one knew them, a place without clubs, without watchers. Mark picked up work fixing engines at a small marina, paid under the table. Quiet. Eli went to school. He made friends, smiled again. The days were still haunted, but they were peaceful, until one morning, Mark stepped outside and saw something on the hood of his car, a black biker patch, folded perfectly. No message. No signature. Just a silent gesture, a reminder. Mark stood in the salty wind, holding the patch in one hand and a cigarette in the other, staring out at the waves. He didn't feel like the man who had stopped on that rainy highway months ago. That man had been soft, naive, desperate. Now, he was something else. He wasn't sure what, exactly. Not a criminal, not a biker, not a hero, but not a victim either. He'd walked through fire and come out scorched, not broken. He tossed the patch into the waves and turned back toward the trailer, where Eli was waiting, frying eggs and humming along to the radio. Asterisk, some stories end with justice, some with vengeance. Mark's ended with survival. And that, in the world he glimpsed, was the closest thing to a victory.